All right, good day, everyone. Welcome to Conversations on Retail. My name is Matt Fifer, and I am joined today by Tyler Watson, Senior Vice President of Sales from Dano Seasoning. I have really been looking forward to this conversation. Tyler, how are you this week?
Oh man, Dantastic. Dan might be the best Dan day of the week, my man.
I love that. You guys have been busy, and I want to catch up with you a little bit. But your LinkedIn profile is curious. It says from dishwasher to disruptor, and I want people to really have an opportunity to get to know you before we dive into business. Why don't you introduce yourself and talk about how you got involved with Dano's both times and what your role is today?
Yeah, appreciate that, man. I'll kind of start. I think the two stories, both my personal and professional journey, marry up with the brand itself, and really look at myself as an underdog, having an eighth grade education, no high school, no college. Behind me really was looking, for opportunity in the world. Had kids at an early age, first one at 16, another popped out at 18, and wanted to be able to really start to show them while growing up with them that, things aren't limited to accolades and paper, in a frame. Although I believe, there's a ton of value in those things for certain folks out there. I wanted them to see something different. So, really never let that be an obstacle. Constant reinvention, I think, is important for anybody. We have, seasons of life that we change who we are, what we stand for through. And I think that, if you can embrace change and not necessarily focus on consistency, but persistency, which is the biggest difference in my mind, is just being persistent, is being consistent through trials and tribulations to what you believe to be true at that current season. That's what I stand for, man. And so, I think this brand is very similar. Dano's in a sense is, we started selling this stuff behind flea market booths 7, 8 years ago. So toothpicking and sticking chicken and handing it to crowds, getting on taste buds was like what we did. And regionally, it was a lot of fun to build that way, but of course wasn't sustainable for me. So you asked, you mentioned there was two kind of forays into the brand. One was, realizing that I didn't want to spend my time at state fairs and spend every weekend raising a family, but also having to be behind a trade show booth or a barbecue festival booth.
Yeah.
So yeah, walked away from the brand for a little bit. We didn't have the social media presence that we do today. So went a couple of years and did some other things, sold and supported franchise stores for UPS. And then got a call. And really what it was, and sorry, I want to back up a little bit. How I met Dan was I was actually grilling with a neighbor. The neighbor worked with Dan at the bar. He whips out this baggie of seasoning and I'm like, it's like green stuff. And I'm like, what the hell are you about to put on my chicken? And so he's like, oh, it's Dano's. And I'm like, well, I don't know what the hell that is. But I tried it. Everybody loved it. Kids loved it. I said, I got to get some of this stuff. And he's like, well, it's this guy at the bar that just like mixes this stuff up at his house and brings it in. And I'm like, well, that's really peculiar. Like, I'd love to meet the guy. He calls him. I have like a late dinner with Dan that night at his house, where you see all of his TikTok and other content filmed. And we became fast friends. And then I found myself working with the brand. And then again, got that call 3 years after I left the brand. And it was Dan, and he's like, dude, we're kind of getting some traction. We're major on Amazon. I'm like, I know, dude, I'm really proud of you and what you guys have been able to accomplish. I'm seeing your commercials on local TV. And he's like, yeah, we want to try retail out, and we've got some retailers interested in us, and we don't necessarily know how to take that. And I'm like, well, I'd love to figure it out. So that's where 3 years ago I came back onto the brand, and we were in about 200 stores at the time, and now we're in well over probably 15,000 doors as we actively sit 3 years later. So it's been a great journey.
Yeah. Yeah. I told you, it's been several weeks ago now, I guess, that I was shopping in a Hy-Vee store
Yeah.
in West Des Moines and saw your products standing tall and took some home with me that day. Talk about the in between. So, as you told me before, Dan started out bringing in this season in Ziploc bags to work and sharing it with people. Talk about what took place between that and kind of sharing with family and friends to realizing that there might be some momentum and it might be worthy of taking to retail. I guess you created momentum at the fairs and so forth, but at what point did social media begin to, develop a life of its own?
Yeah, man. So that was admittedly while I was gone, right? So like there was like this kind of like mom and pop early grassroots campaigning that was happening regionally with I was a part of. And then when I left, obviously COVID happened really. And Dan tells the story. Basically, he was kind of like almost to Michigan. He was going to do a show up there. The show was canceled. Radios were saying the world's going to change as we know it.
Mm.
We all know that story. And Dan was listening to a podcast by Gary Vaynerchuk, and it was saying, if your business is not advertising on TikTok, you're missing the boat. And so Dan literally got home and he was like, man, the only way I know how to get, sales right now, my livelihood is by handing people physical samples, but I love cooking and I love cooking for people. I always kind of describe that as like the sixth love language, and it's Dan's love language is cooking for people and seeing how it resonates with them. Like he just lives for that. And so, yeah, he took to doing recipes in his kitchen. He just like cleared out his kitchen table at his house, put a camera in front of himself and just started going to town. And within a week had a viral video. It was canned crab cake. So, of course, everybody in Maryland kind of went wild in the Northeast and said, that's not how you do it. What's this, Danos? That's trash. Haters were out in full force. But he stayed very true to the personality that we live to today is, hey, I'm not an expert, but you don't know till you Dano. And he went in and commented on every single negative comment. Said, you don't know till you Dano. And sales blew up, and there was curiosity was piqued at that moment, and I think that it resonated with folks that there's this guy who's not a culinary artist, he's a culinary explorer. If Dan can do it, anybody can do it. Kind of created that permission I think people were looking for in a new world where we're cooking at home a lot more, we're exploring more culinary options, we're cooking for our family more, and we want to be proud. Like we want that sense of pride. I mean, what it's like to walk in with that plate of burgers right after a cookout, and you're like everybody's taking their first bite, and you're just kind of like waiting for everybody to give you that that reaffirmation that you've done a good job. That's what I think we've helped stir up and pioneer within the social media foodie boom.
Yeah. So you started off sort of hand-to-hand combat, if you will, meeting people at fairs and farmers markets and so forth, and then eventually selling from your own website direct to consumer, correct? At what point did you make the first step into sort of major retailer, either online or brick and mortar? What was the first move?
Yeah, I love telling this. I think the journey was really like we had some first to market national retail opportunities, and that was Walmart first, Kroger second. But really where I think like the most exciting part of the story was for me as the person who kind of built this network out across the country and approached these retailers, was the Hy-Vees and the food cities and the kind of 100 to 200 door chains that we did find early adoption within, and those are the people that I still like really love to talk to because regardless of how small of an account that might be relative to our total business at this point, those are people that still give us a lot of opportunities. We see household penetration much higher in those areas. Because we invested in those areas and those areas invested in us. And so, yeah, we had, Hy-Vee again was one of our very early accounts. Fairway meat stores out that way was also the same. And then Food City out this way, was an early adopter. And then even like speaking to West Coast, like Rayleigh's was an early adopter account there. Still have a great relationship with the buyer, Simone there. But I would say like our first national expansions were Walmart first to market, across coast to coast, and then Kroger was right soon after.
Yeah. So based on the virality of what Dan continues to do on social media, has it been your experience that retailers have come to you, or are you still having to go to them to initiate those conversations? And has the recognition that has come from the virality of what he's doing on social media, has it made it easier to sell it in?
Yeah, I would say I'd say it's a 50-50 on whether they're coming to us or we're going to them. I think there's still a lot of work with regard to the sell-in process because of this differentiation with social media is so new to the category. You could kind of look across the way and look at disruptors of water with liquid death and dude wipes with toilet paper. I mean, I think those are categories that don't quite have as much saturation of disruptors and insurgent brands as seasonings does now. But I think we really use the social media as leverage because we have the biggest engine within the category of it, as a way to lead for sure. But man, it's still a tough selling process. You're still fighting for shelf space, and you're still, trying to prove that you're over indexed and underspaced during every conversation.
Yeah. As you alluded, it is a very, very crowded category. And so, obviously to make your way in, somebody's got to be kicked out or at least thinned out in order to make space. Besides what you're doing on social media, what have you done to sort of drive demand in order to take market share and to go after those big incumbents?
Yeah, it's really been interesting. I mean, when we first got in, I mean, we're at an ultra premium price point from a price per ounce standpoint relative to the category. So that's been, a big learning curve for us is we don't tout it, but our stuff is like full of like real ingredients. It's not just a bunch of salt and fillers and things like that. So although we don't market that first, I think that contributes to the premium aspect that we're still really trying to figure out how to message to the consumer in the right way. Because, when you look at our like, you can say, 11, 12 million followers is a lot of people, but relative to who's shopping in the category, we're still at like under 3% household penetration. So, we've got, 96%, 97% of people to message our value props to. And so we're I think those are learning curves, but I think what we've done is, and this is really something we started doing this year strategically, is looking at our trade spend analysis and being very smart about where we plot it, how deep we plot it, and how frequent we plot it. And so, speaking to rest of the market outside of Walmart, in the grocery business specifically, we've been very intentional on how we spend those dollars to recruit new buyers, because it was interesting. We did a consumer study not too long ago that said that basically only like 22% of people who had bought Danos were familiar with there being a Dan Oliver, an actual founder associated with the brand. So that told me that we've got a huge runway as a brand. But then we've also got a lot of brand awareness to instill from a social media aspect, and maybe that's not our largest engine, and maybe we need to invest a lot heavier at the shelf, which is what we're trying to do now. And I would say there's also like, you'll see new labels from us in the next probably 18 to 24 months. I think that's something that we need to evolve, and it's not a secret that we need to do that. I think we still look a lot like a farmer's market brand in a way. And, we're trying to figure out, how do we keep the authenticity of the origin, right, without going too crazy and out of off brand, I should say. So, but to answer your question, I would say price promotion and shopper marketing are two things that we're probably investing more in now than ever.
Yeah. So I want to follow up the question about shopper marketing. What are some of your most successful tactics? And I know it would be different depending on the retailer, but where have you found momentum?
It's hard to say this early. I mean, we really started doing this stuff within the last, I would say, probably 8 to 10 months. But I would say that it would be just me spitballing at this point. But I would say like shelf talkers are a good way to like, really have that POP at point of purchase, have the brand recognition and awareness at the point of purchase there when they're standing at the shelf. I like them. I think it just it's like having an extra two facings on the shelf to me.
Yeah.
And I think it shows investment to the retailer that, we're doing more than just being happy with sitting on the shelf and touting our social media. We're kind of playing the game. I hated the thought of going conventional with methods like that, but I think with our creative, it was like our last one was like cook around and find out. I think we're really staying, that was like the verbiage on it. And, it was, and so I think we can separate ourselves from it by saying, keeping the brand tone, voice, there and stuff. But I would say that was probably like the first thing that comes to mind. And the second would be just like the way we're starting to create a digital presence around, targeted spend when it comes to competitor listings and showing up where we want to show up with certain keywords. We're getting really intentional on the keywords that we do use and focusing in on the use occasion and seasonality. So, I mean, those might sound like things that, everybody's doing, right? But I think with that, everybody can be very focused on one use occasion, and we're trying to win different. Well, we believe that they're different than what the rest of the category is looking at this point.
Sure. Are you still doing sampling, small scale, large scale?
We are. At club, in the club channel we are,
Yeah.
because I think that's probably the strongest vehicle for us to gain some share there. Um, we've not done much in the way of grocery channel sampling. We have in the past, and we saw great lift in the stores that we did do it in. And I think that it's still of consideration as a tactic, but no, and I think we could do a lot more of it. But those things are really expensive, man. I mean,
Yeah.
when you look at uh, a seasoning, right? It's an enhancer, so you got to purchase whatever the vehicle is. So, like it could be a popcorn, it could be chicken, but either way, if there's multiple steps to that. You've got to invest a little further than just the demo cost.
Yeah. What advice would you give to other startup and challenger brands that might not have the benefit of someone like Dan, who is such an amazing, storyteller and great evangelist for the brand? What advice would you give to those companies that are trying to break into really competitive categories?
I've really enjoyed what I've learned about, like, I just posted about this on LinkedIn, so maybe you saw it, but it was like, I didn't know jack shit about CPG when I got into this,
Mm-hmm.
but I've really enjoyed what I've learned about marketing in this business. And I love just the, um, out of the box thinking from a lot of these brands that I've mentioned and admire in the space, both center store and perimeter. And I think, if I were to probably give any advice, it would be like what I've learned in marketing is that there's the five P's, right? And so it's not necessarily nailing one of them; it's getting them all to converge around the same time in order to win. And so whatever that looks like, if you don't have a social media engine, which I believe has been a huge like mushroom as a Mario reference for
Yeah.
us to have. How do you do it without that? And those are the things I believe you have to win on, and you have to make sure they converge around the same time. They don't have to all happen at the same time, but I think that in those early stages, it's important to figure out how to marry those things up. And I'm not saying we've got it mastered by any means. I'm just saying that I think that's probably the most important thing that I would spend time on in the early stages.
To your point, just now about the growth, the learning curve. To what extent have you sort of had to leverage outsiders to, whether it's growth agency or shopper marketing agencies, packaging companies, to sort of benefit from their knowledge and learn and I'm assuming take over a lot of that, as time has gone on. But to what extent have you relied on outsiders to teach you the business as you've grown?
So speaking for the brand, I would say that we've done a lot of outsourcing and honestly have probably seen a lot more, never seen the light of day because it just didn't feel right. Or that we just didn't have the capacity to execute on whatever strategy it was that was put in front of us and it was told to us. Because I think that at the end of the day, like it's all about the team and execution, not necessarily just leading a horse to water, right? So I would say we've probably learned a ton, but we've also been a little bit stubborn to what we maybe sometimes believe is where we should be, and I don't know that I would always like. There's a lot of disagreements, I guess I should probably say, internally, and then like personally, like I've sought out a lot of mentors within the space. I mean, like the biggest contender in the category, their CEO and founder is probably somebody I consider as my number one mentor and somebody I look up to because regardless of whether they're competing against us and stealing, a tremendous amount of market share from the category leaders, there's something to learn about that. And whether it's, just kind of like staying true to your morals and not necessarily following and copycatting what they're doing, I think that's really important. So I would say like, man, I've absolutely said I don't know 1,000 times in the last 3 years to people that probably nobody else would say I don't know to buyers, merchant bosses, VPs. But I believe that those open up a vulnerability and humility that allow for that person to, level with me a little bit and understand, hey, these guys need some help along the way. And like, I believe in this brand and it's got legs. So like, let's help them get to that next level because when we're all winning if this guy wins, right? Because I think Danos in general, like people are really rooting for it.
Yeah. What's the future look like? And you could take that 100 different ways, I guess. I mean, there's seems like economic headwinds that might put some pressure on a premium brand. All kinds of new retail media opportunities with some of the biggest and best retailers. What does the future look like for the brand and your retail execution?
Yeah, huge question mark. I would say like the brand itself has created stir within the category that is undeniable and has a lot of staying power with regard to the word fun. And I almost hate using that word because I think that it's like everybody can kind of say they're fun in a way, but in the way that I mean it is like kind of goes back to that like permission we give to explore culinary in a way that is very approachable. So I would say, if the future were just solely you and I talking about this, it would be how do we continue to create solutions for people outside of the seasoning category with this brand and stay true to that message of fun and permission to experiment.
Yeah. One of the things that I love so much, I've been in retail for almost 35 years, and one of the things that I love so much about the industry is how open we are with one another, how collaborative we are. And as you mentioned, pure competitor is one of your favorite mentors, one of your best mentors. So my question to you is, what kind of help does your team need right now? Are there any issues that you would just reach out to the community and say, we would love a better understanding of on-shelf availability or better understanding of seasonal planning or package design? Is there any area where you could just use a little help?
All of it. I think there's a lot of opportunity on e-com that I believe, from a revenue standpoint, we probably are slightly green in, although it's become one of those things where we're looking at it. I think at first we looked at e-com as a recruitment channel to retail. And at this point, we're starting to realize that it's its own revenue channel, and it can also be a recruitment tool. So I'd say that's like number one. Because of our digitally native presence, we should figure that out. And so we're actively kind of seeking help there. Trade spend, man, I think that's something it's a bear to get your arms around. I think it's ever changing. So, that's another thing I think, probably forward looking 12 to 18 months would like to understand, category management a lot better. And then innovation. I think, the innovation piece is probably, I'd like to call it invention. The word innovation is probably a little bit overused. But I think if we could learn to invent the right way, and I think we need help there because we don't have a team of experienced CPG people. That would be like level up stuff would be helpful for us to understand what, and that really comes from good feedback from buyers in the past. We haven't been able to innovate to certain things that we would have really liked to, because of the scale up and trying to kind of protect the core business. Although I believe that those opportunities were missed opportunities as the sales guy, because I'm always going to say that. But I think that it's important for us to figure out the funnel, the pipeline of the brand.
Yeah. Well, as I've shared, I am such a fan of the Dan-O's brand. Met the company by way of Dan on social media, like so many others, and experienced it, by way of purchasing from Hy-Vee. Great product, great story. Congratulations to you and the entire team on what you've achieved. And I know there's a lot of folks who are going to be watching this, so we'll probably be reaching out saying, "Hey, we'd love to offer you some insight in this area." And I hope folks will. And best of luck going forward.
Oh man, thank you, brother. I appreciate it. And it was great being with you today, Matt. So thanks for sharing our story and sharing, allowing for us to share some of the ways we need help, because I know your network is pretty extensive. I look forward to talking to a lot of your friends.
Yes, sir. Tyler Watson, Senior Vice President of Sales, Dan-O Seasoning. Have a great day.